10 years old, you created your first virus.
Yeah, I'm sure this is not in this space it happened.
Why did you do that? What's the goal?
To scare the shit out of you and make me laugh.
You're the co-founder and CEO of Naoris Protocol.
Naoris Protocol is just a universal trust system. Whatever you thought was a secret is no longer. Like your transactions, your keys, whatever it is. So we're using what's there already to create a consensus driven by that existing decentralization, backed by that decentralization, with very strong mathematical principles that proves that the thing is in a good state for everything. Security is very different than trust. What you want to have is trust about the truth you're saying.
You guys raised $36 million and brought in names like Tim Draper, who's a big Bitcoin OG. What are you guys doing with all this money?
We have created a number of technologies that solve these fundamental problems that I was telling you about.
Hey, When Shift Happens family. Welcome to Drops, a podcast series where we showcase smaller rising star projects in the crypto space. Since When Shift Happens started to take off, we've received hundreds of requests from many great projects every month that we had to say no to because they weren't a good fit yet in terms of size and impact. But this has now changed with the Drops podcast series. We're building When Shift Happens, the most credible platform in crypto. And there is no reason why smaller projects with big potential shouldn't have a chance to be heard. Drops is not a research service nor an endorsement, but a way to give a voice to the potential big crypto founders of tomorrow. 10 years ago, man, time flies, it's crazy.
10 years ago, yes. I remember it like it was yesterday. It's ridiculous. It's unreal how time flies.
Did you live in Spain or never?
No, it was in London.
London?
I lived in London like 4 years. In total, I lived in the UK like 5 years, lived in Belfast as well. Northern Ireland.
Belfast.
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 Oi, mate, what's the crack, eh?
That's a tough one, man. I also lived in London for 3 years, right after Madrid.
Yeah.
That was very tough already because 1 year Madrid, sunny, people very nice.
Yeah.
Pretty chill,
and
amazing
genuine
food.
as well.
Yeah, and then you move to London, which is like this, 8-9 million people city where...
No, it's more. It's like 14.
Is it 14? I mean,
crazy.
You have all these people, but there's no people. Like everybody's so stressed and in their own life.
Absolutely.
You don't see
Bubble.
them. So basically, you're like coming from Madrid to London. It was like depression, man. It was horrible.
Yeah, I feel.
And then I can't even imagine in Belfast.
Well, it's a place. It's an interesting place to visit, but it's definitely like all the stuff that you hear about, the IRA and all this stuff, and the troubles that were there and the kind of like revolutionary forces. It's still all happening.
Yeah.
But you have no idea because it's no longer news. It's the same stuff.
Yeah.
So it's really weird. Like I was working for Electronic Arts there, like the gaming company.
Yeah.
And I was like, why are there armored personal carriers in the street? Like,
why are they not in Dublin? Because a lot of tech companies, right?
Yeah.
In Dublin for tax reasons.
Yeah, I don't know. I think from a tax perspective, I think Northern Ireland is even better.
Okay.
Because
but maybe
it's basically an enclave that's there, a British enclave that everybody there is just paid to live. Like if you're born a Northern Irish, you're
yeah.
so that you don't revolt,
So probably the tech companies at least are thinking about their employees a bit more, and they're like, let's do something in Dublin which is a bit less.
Yeah, that's Ireland,
tough.
right? It's like in Northern Ireland, it's just problematic. It's a problematic place. Yeah. It's an experience.
I was actually there last summer for 3 days, and I think
3 days is okay.
It was incredible, and we had the perfect weather.
Yeah.
And they actually,
in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, they said these are the 3 days of the year with good weather.
That's what I was thinking.
I was like, this is crazy, man.
Like
it was awesome.
People say, on the 17th of June between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. is the best day.
Yeah,
it's the best summer day.
Crazy, man. How is that in Portugal? We're recording that from Portugal. Life in Portugal.
Oh, it's
weather
great.
in Portugal. Obviously, it's great.
I lived in a bunch of places.
Where do you live?
I spent a little bit of time in China, in Norway. I lived also in the UK, of course. In Northern Ireland, I guess it's also UK, but London, Northern Ireland. Bratislava, Slovakia.
Interesting.
Budapest, Bucharest, a small time, and also in Italy, close to Venice. Am I forgetting something? Yeah, I was also I also lived for like a month and a half, not too much, but in Seoul.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. What do you prefer? What was your most
After all of this,
epic?
so ironically, I never worked in Portugal, like ever. I always worked everywhere. But after all these years, like it was maybe 12 years in total, I realized that the nicest quality of life, and it's not just, my family's here, that helps, but the nicest quality of life and the cheapest prices and everything and what you get for the money, and
Incredible.
in my experience, is here.
Incredible.
I came back.
I took an Uber last night from the airport at 1 a.m., 10 euros
Yeah.
to come to the city.
Yeah.
Like, this is for like a Uber Black, right? Or
Yeah,
Comfort, like, it's
totally.
insane.
Same. I was like almost an hour in the road and I paid 8 euros. So, but that's like transversal across all things. Like you ask for a coffee, it's 60 cents.
Yeah.
Like you go to Spain, you ask for a coffee, it's 2 euros and a half, something like that, right?
In Dubai, I would pay 15 euros for.
It depends where you go, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, so-
Or like a bottle of water is $10, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What was your most expensive Uber? Where?
New York.
Oh, really?
New York. Yeah.
For me, it
Like-
was Luxembourg.
Actually, Switzerland also very expensive, I would say. But New York, like for 15 minutes, like $80 or $90. It was raining, so
Uh-huh.
it was high.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Luxembourg also about 15 minutes, 200 something.
Yeah. That's very Luxembourg and Switzerland. Very.
What?
You learn to take the train.
Well,
You learn to take the train in these countries.
I learned a lot what I shouldn't do.
It doesn't mean you do it. It just means you know that you shouldn't do it.
Exactly. But in the end, if you have to do it, you do it. Right? Yeah. It was more expensive than, the hotel to go 15 minutes in an Uber.
Mm.
That's weird.
You moved a lot
Mm.
all your life
Not all my life, no.
in the last 12 years.
Yeah, because I was doing a lot of contracts. I think the longest engagement I had with the company was like close to 4 years, not even. And then it was like 3 months, 6 months, 12 months.
You grew up in rural Portugal
That's the place.
and you moved a lot in the last 12 years.
Yeah.
If you had to explain what it is you do and why you do it to a 12-year-old growing in rural Portugal today,
Oh,
what
wow.
would you say?
That's fantastic. Wow, that's a good question. Not sure if I'm prepared. So, everything that ends up happening in your life is like, just the consequence of a number of funny jokes that happen, and then you deal with them, and eventually that becomes you. Right?
That's a good way of seeing life, actually. It's very nice.
So fortunately, nothing bad happened. Like grew up with a loving family. My parents, they're like they have been with each other for 40 years, maybe more. I'm probably butchering the time, but around that. And they feel like they're 16 around each other. It's really nice to see. And so it was a lovely place as well, like full of nature. Farm animals, rivers, stuff like that. It was beautiful. Also had some nice friends growing up, very nice atmosphere. But then eventually a computer arrived at home. Still don't know why. My father is like one of the most technology, resistant people I've ever met. It's like, this doesn't help with anything. He bought it.
He still thinks today the same?
Yeah.
Does he know about AI?
Oh, yeah, for sure. He doesn't use it.
What does he think about AI? This doesn't help for anything.
He teaches philosophy, psychology, and sociology. So AI is, ironically, one of the most, the movies that he likes the most is, for example, Matrix. The Matrix, right? So AI was always part of his, even before there was AI, there was a deep philosophical conversation around that topic, like a non-human intelligence, sort of approach that can maybe tamper with our brains in society and what we believe in and all these things. So what he thinks about AI is better, lack of a better word, agnostic about it, but he's very conscious of its potential risks. And I think that was since forever. And the first time that I've seen him like represent, visually about his own fears about some sort of intelligence, doesn't matter if it's AI or other things, compared to us and the path that humans take, was literally, what you see reflected in the Matrix. Because it's all to do, right now AI is being used for mundane things, but very, very, very soon you will probably have, if not already, you'll have AI analyzing, the circuitry in our brain and, being used by, insert company or government here to manipulate us in some way. And that tampers with your freedom and your individuality and the person that you are, which is very deeply philosophical. So, yeah, that's an area that I'm sure he finds fascinating.
So he brought that laptop, that computer at home.
Oh, yeah. That was way before laptops. Yeah, he bought that computer at home. No idea why. It was very expensive. I remember getting a game for it from an aunt of mine. And it was, I needed 2 more megabytes of RAM. And it was like the equivalent of like 200 euros. So then we bought those 2 megabytes of RAM because it only had 2 and now we had 4. And it still didn't run. The game still didn't run. So one of the reasons why I ended up doing what I do today is because that stuff was not good enough to run games. If it was, I probably would.
So you had a computer that was not good enough to run a game, and therefore you learn programming?
That's right. Therefore you run, you write code, you edit, batch files, you play with what you can, which is a different game, really.
How old were you?
I think maybe 6, maybe.
6 years old?
Yeah, 6 years old now I got the computer. And the only thing I could do was like, I was the king of formatting hard drives. So, there was not much to do in there, but at the same time, there was a lot to do. As a kid in a village, you can see only so many frogs and ants and so on before it becomes a little bit old. And that was like, an open world, and then internet came, the 56K modem singing to you, all that stuff. And, triggering massive bills, phone bills that my parents were not happy about at all. Gave access to, massive amounts of information. But I think anybody from my generation has this experience. It maybe just we used it in a little bit different way. I don't know, but it was very exciting, whole new world. And I just thought, because I always like to how can I say, take things apart and see how they work. Radios, TVs, Hoovers, whatever. And I couldn't do that with the computer; it was too expensive. So I just tried to do that on the software side and see how I could manipulate that. And that led to other curiosities, but eventually led me to create let's call it a virus, let's say, or a malicious piece of code that I called Sunday, that actually only activated on Saturdays because my English was bad.
Tell me more about this virus.
Yeah.
What was the goal of this virus? You were 13 when you did that?
No, I was about like maybe 10 or so.
10 years old, you created your first virus?
Yeah, I'm sure this is not in this space it happens. Yeah.
Why did you do that? What was the goal?
Because it was fun.
But what was the goal of the virus?
To scare the shit out of you and make me laugh.
How does that scare me?
Because if you're infected by it and you turn on your computer, it will show you, and at the time it was MS-DOS. So as it boots up, it would show you have been infected by Sunday, your hard drive is being formatted, and you're like, oh my God, my work.
And the only thing he was doing was basically that, right?
Yeah.
He was not destroying anything. It was just
it was just for fun.
Yeah.
Right. But it could. I had no intention of destroying people's lives or whatever. And every time it was, that game was actually passed to someone else and they installed it, it was now there. And it just executed.
Every Saturday instead of every Sunday.
Yeah, that was the confusing
So once
part.
a week he would execute.
That's right, forever. And
Saturday.
But I was not good at English, so I actually switched the days. It was very confusing. I can imagine for the people looking at it, like you're infected by Sunday, and they're like, no, but it's Saturday. Like, what's going on? Yeah.
Maybe removed a bit of the fear, or made it worse. Actually, what the fuck? I don't understand what's going on.
Confusion.
You told me you were not very social as a kid. You spent hours watching the landscape, the countryside.
Yeah.
So much so that your parents quickly noticed that something was kind of weird with
true.
you.
Yeah.
What was happening in your mind?
I think I was somewhere in the spectrum of something, and I really like to analyze things. And for me, the most interesting thing was actually, just life, animals around me, ants, how they, lived and worked, and they were extremely interesting to watch, all their behavior.
What did you learn from the ants?
Well, that if you work very hard, eventually you'll get food and housing, and at least that
makes sense.
Oh, and that the union makes strength as well.
True.
So yeah, I would spend anybody that knows me in that village can attest to this. Like I was known as the weird kid that would spend 8 hours looking at the thing until my mom, at the ants moving, literally there, until my mom or my grandma would say, "Hey, it's time to go have dinner," and I'm like, "Okay." Yeah.
Have you ever been diagnosed with some? You said spectrum.
Yeah.
Like autism, or I don't know what kind of.
Yeah, or Asperger's or whatever.
Asperger. I had a lot of Asperger people on this podcast, I think. I mean, I suspected Asperger. You're very social Asperger. I've had a lot of people who were very kind of weird.
I faked it till I made it.
Okay, great.
Honest to God.
Yeah?
Yeah. Like, I basically mimicked the other people in general. Like, I don't know if I have Asperger's. I believe I do. I think there was some, or something. I have something, or I had something.
Yeah.
But I know at a certain point my parents took me to see somebody about that. But I just saw how the other people were so good at creating communication in a space that was absolutely chaotic for me. It was just unintelligible. Like, I didn't understand how human relationships work, and they went how they would go from being nice to being aggressive, and it just didn't make any sense to me. It was very, very weird. It didn't help that my first day in primary school, I was pushed down the stairs by the first kid that saw me, and I was like, no, humans are not for me.
Did you ever feel alone, lonely?
I think that's a very human feeling to have, right?
But do you think you felt more lonely than the average kid because you were spending all your time alone? You were just happy like that?
No, I didn't feel lonely. Most times, no. Sometimes, very rarely, Just I'm not sure if this happened with you when you were a kid, but let's say you had a fight with the neighbor, bloody nose kind of thing. After 5 minutes, we're friends again. It was hard to be alone when you're surrounded by nature. And even if I was alone, I would go to the creek and catch some frogs or some crayfish or whatever, and I wouldn't feel alone anymore.
You didn't finish your college degree? Your university degree?
Yeah, no.
Why?
Both.
Both?
Both of them at the same time, yeah. Why? Well, it was a mix of, personal kind of relationships that weighted on me, and I am a very sensitive person, and mixed with the fact that I am pretty good at the things I like, and I am the worst at the things I don't. So I don't even participate. So it's very hard for you to finish a university course if you don't show up in certain classes or if you don't go to certain exams because you just don't like that subject. But otherwise, the ones that I liked, I was one of the best. It was a decision that was kind of it was not really a decision. I just thought, I was doing other things at the same time. So I was doing ethical hacking at the same time that I was in uni. So I had a job, quote, quote, freelancing job. And I really enjoyed it. And classes were, it sounds weird to say this, but I felt like I was losing time most of the time there. of course, you always learn things in uni, and I learned a lot of things. Most of them not useful for me. But the areas that I really enjoyed, I was actually just an autodidact on, and that's what I wanted to do, and that was nothing to do with uni. But at that time, I had this beautiful idea of going to the director of another course, and I made friends with him, and he's like, oh, if you come to this course, you can have equivalences, and you can, need to do this, and you just need to go to the classes of one, and you can do both, and this is very exciting. It's like new, management related and also IT related, and I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. I could, create more difficulty for myself. That sounds like a good idea. So, and I have like this weird instinct sometimes when I'm under pressure to put myself in a corner, kind of like, what you call like between the sword and the wall. It's a Portuguese expression in English. And at that moment, I kind of like the best of me comes out. And I decided to do that to myself. And then other things in my personal life didn't go so well. And, I lost that one. But didn't impact, I believe, my progress in other things, because I ended up not really doing anything that was directly, well, not directly, but semi-directly related to what I've learned.
I think that's the case for many people, actually.
I agree.
Your skills enabled you to get multiple senior roles in security department of some major companies. If I think about the chief security officer of a company, that's a lot of responsibilities, right?
Yeah.
How can a company fully trust the guy who is responsible for their entire security?
It's an amazing question. I asked that myself also. I asked that about myself, about my teams. So just like anything in a company, everything is best effort, right? And it's also driven by budget, right?
Yeah.
So you look at I guess, for example, when I interviewed people for areas where you basically give the keys of the kingdom to them, it was a lot more important to me what kind of character they had. Were they good people? Were they assholes?
How do you know if someone is a good person?
I was always good at reading people.
How do you read people?
It's an innate quality I always had.
Why do you think you're so good at reading people?
I've had intelligence agents that told me that are friends of mine. but besides that, it's something that, obviously as you live your life, you meet many people. And eventually they reveal themselves for what they are or what they are not, right? You just need to wait for it. And I have realized over time that I was overwhelmingly right. My instincts were overwhelmingly right, in these contexts. And I just had to trust them. And I trust them. I trust them fully. And pretty much every time I didn't trust them, that includes business, that includes personal relationships, it includes friendship, many other things. And anytime I rationalized them and I didn't actually listen to them, because we are rationalization machines as humans, I got burned, right? A lot or a little.
Your gut feeling is always right?
In some
That's
way.
why we have guts, absolutely. If you listen, but there's a point we don't listen. We rationalize, right? We're like, but maybe, we think about the potential.
There's another reason what this may be happening.
In relationships, it's the same. It's just, in business, in romantic, it's always like, you know if it's good for you or not, but it doesn't mean
I agree.
you make the right decision.
And of course, when I interviewed people in those areas, I was like, hey, here's the laptop, here's the Wi-Fi network, here's Metasploit, have fun. Or here's Kali Linux, and it doesn't matter how many certifications you have. You either know how to do things or you don't. And from that point on, it was kind of like it's just instinct, really. Me reading that person, and I believe on the other side when I got hired to such roles, that didn't happen that much. So it's not by chance that the internal threat is the biggest threat, Like like I say, you give the keys to the kingdom to people.
Yeah, you might have some external people who come and actually pay people internally
Absolutely.
to it's same if you're the chief security of you're hired for the security of a place that stores gold, for example.
Yeah.
Someone comes and says, "Hey, like I'll give you $1 million," and you just forget to close the door, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
He's probably going to do it, right? And even if he's a good person, like, it's probably like at some point is how much do I make? How much do I receive now? And so then you're in the security department. IT security is very similar. Hey, like
it's actually very similar. I would say it's probably even more because all the physical controls are dependent on digital controls, and you have access potentially to, or your team to all of them. So there's clearances, there's certifications, there's other things that hopefully bring resilience to the process. But in the end, it's really a best effort, and I haven't found a good substitute for as you call it, the sixth sense or the gut or whatever you want to call it, mixed with the capability. But you're right; it's a role that is very taxing, like even physically. Because your worry reflects in your body and in your sleep, in your patterns of life, and
that's why the gray beard.
Absolutely,
I have the same starting, so maybe I should do something different.
You're good. You have a long way to go, my friend. These actually started and finished during the time that I was the CISO. Honestly, like preventing breaches and stopping them from being public and stuff.
And now it's finished.
Pretty much.
You don't have you're not growing new gray hair.
It's definitely moving forward, but it's at a pace that it's incomparable. Yeah. But I think I'm more worried now. It's just a different kind of worry.
We're always worried.
Yeah.
That's a good thing, actually. We stay like alert.
Yeah.
As men, we have to. You were the chief security officer of the London City Airport.
Yeah, I was under contract there, yeah.
What's the kind of work that you focus on when you lead cybersecurity at an airport?
Well, in any kind of like national critical infrastructure, just like that, especially in an environment where people's lives may be at risk, it's an extra worry, right? It's how is it? It is actually not very different than in other places. The only difference is that people are part of the, the scheme of operations, right? Like people are, quote, quote, the object that you're moving, right? And that's very serious.
Yeah, that's very serious.
Yeah, but the kind of risks that you're under are basically the same. Just the consequences are much worse, right? And this was at the time that, this was just post some, terrorist events in London, in the underground, and everybody was very...
I remember 2016, I lived there, and we had 4 terrorist attacks in one summer.
Yeah, I remember this.
Yeah.
So I decided not to use the underground anymore.
Yeah.
And when I did, I was basically putting myself behind the pillars and like thinking, okay, let me see the angle. It's crazy. Like, this is not a good way to live.
I was actually thinking, same, I was still taking the tube, right? But I was like, if I'm a terrorist, where would I go? I would probably go in the middle. Therefore, I'm going to go at the end.
That's right.
But then if I'm a smart terrorist, what will I think that people do? People will think they should not go in the middle, they should go at the end. So maybe the terrorist then will go at the end, right? So basically, then you're like, I don't know where the fuck to go, right?
Yeah, is it a smart terrorist, a dumb terrorist, or something in the middle?
The truth is like you're always, every morning you're scared, right? And it's horrible.
I just decided not to play the game.
Yeah.
So I just didn't go to the underground anymore. There was never a situation in my life. So everybody knew me as the guy that was always on a suit. I hate suits. And I walked through London on a suit with there was this day that I ended up walking more than 20 kilometers on a suit. What terrorism does to your mind.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
You were also the security boss of the OCS group, which is a group with more than 100,000 people.
Yeah.
What do you even prioritize when you work with so many people?
Well, it was a very interesting experience because I was the global chief security. this is a company that is like more than 100 years old, and that was still owned by the original family, with like hundreds of board members. Very interesting space to work in, and they owned like hundreds of companies all around the world. So they grew by acquisition. They did all kinds of work, from security to facilities management to. They were one of the biggest employers in some Asian countries and things like this, and. All these businesses kind of like were driven by their own leadership. So you had like basically ships leaving the port going in all different directions. And sometimes people don't want to listen to the quote central authority. It taught me that decentralized organizations like that one, it was pretty decentralized. It was all over the world. And it was like, pieces of it all over the world with their own leadership, their own CEO, CTO, so on, are extremely hard to manage. So you do best effort, right, with the tools you have, but you do it from a centralized place. And you suffer, of course, I'm talking from a perspective of decentralization now, but at the time, this was, crypto was already around for a while, and I was a miner for a while already. And for me, it just made sense for the world to go in that direction, logically from a networks perspective, like IT management, whatever. And it was just, it's troubling to, how can I say, try to push for things where you have no visibility of the underlying, variables that are going to give you information about that. Like everything you're getting is in second hand, maybe third hand, and you know how story works. I tell you a story, you tell a story, the other person tells a story, and in the end, it's not the same story, right? Even if you have good intentions, it might change, right? It's hard to deal with, but that's been how companies have been managed since forever. And then if you add the risk to the equation, that's where it comes from, right?
You said if you have good intentions, but there's also people who don't have the best intentions. You left corporate life and created the ZAP, Zero Asshole Policy.
Yep.
What was the moment, the final straw, when you knew you had to do things on your own term?
If people are hearing me from OCS, I love you guys. It's an internal struggle I have. So I was very, very good at my job. There are stories I cannot talk about, but that they reflect that. And I loved my job. I really did. And my boss knows it. We had very good relationship. We still do at that time, all the way to now. And he's actually one of the advisors in Naoris Protocol. And the struggle I had was that, corporate culture was something that I never really enjoyed, like the traditional corporate culture. People are not too nice to each other. They don't necessarily treat each other very well always. Friendships are easily broken for other reasons that have to do with I'm a manager now, so I'm not talking to you anymore. And it's not really like this, but you know what I mean. And other things that were just, I didn't want to be part of. And there was this day, and I remember it very well, where there was like a watershed moment. I was like with 40 degrees fever. I was miserable at home in bed. I could barely move, make thoughts happen. And I will remember thinking to myself, I'm so happy. I am so effing happy right now. But why? I am miserable right now. I'm with 40 degrees fever. All my body is in pain. I can't move from here. Why am I happy? And I realized I was happy because I couldn't go to work. And that was the moment that I was like, okay, I need to change my life. I need to, because I always like to create things. So I do digital art. I do, I like to do sculptures. I like to paint. I really like to build things, to write things, to I really enjoy the creation process. And in companies, being in an operational role, creating is always what I wanted. Like, I want to do this, I want to make this happen. And you always find resistance. Humans are naturally resistant to change, right? So I was like, I need to go and create my own change elsewhere. And I told my boss about it, and I had some interesting ideas. He liked that. He's like, okay, yeah, no worries, and I'll support you. And then it led me to the ZAP policy, the creation of the ZAP policy for my own company. ZAP means Zero Assholes Policy, which just means that I care, or we care, a lot more about the character of the person that's in the team than other things. Like, you can have, for example, a high-performance individual that is an asshole, poison an entire team. I've seen these over and over and over again, and bring their morale down, bring their work capability down, just make everybody hate each other, and then they leave, and you're training them for years, you don't want them to leave, right? So I want people to feel good. And I want people to respect and understand that we're humans, we're going to make mistakes. All we need to do is help each other. And that's what I want them to do with me. That's what I want them to do with each other. And I want them to feel good just like I wanted to feel, and now I do. I feel we have a beautiful group. We always had a beautiful group in this company, from, advisors that, you wouldn't believe, like, we have a number of advisors that are like, former NATO generals and stuff like that. They are so nice.
Tell me more about the NATO kind of story, right? You advised NATO member states on cyber warfare, terrorism. Like, how did that happen?
It just happened pretty much organically. So as I got to, CISO level roles, I ended up because I was very much focused on creating, new methods of like dealing with risk and so on. So I ended up speaking in a lot of events back in the day. So I used to do like maybe 40 to 60, maybe sometimes 90 events a year as a speaker all over Europe, but mainly at the time, mainly in the UK. Also in other places, but yeah. And I ended up meeting, in very more critical sort of events, because in some companies that I was in, we had like a foot on the door with regulators, with countries themselves. So I had access to those people, and we had panels, we had discussions, we had dinners, right, on these events. There were many times like 3-4 days events. And so you can actually build relationships with them. They were not the kind of events that like Web Summit or something, like where you go. Nothing against Web Summit; it serves its own purpose. But I'm talking about an event with 30 people, right? And the objective is for it's not necessarily to talk to a huge audience. It's actually for you to create value by meeting people and exchanging ideas and growing. And so it's kind of like family sized. So that's where I found the most value, and ended up meeting these people and seeing that we had some crazy ideas that were aligned. And I found that people on the military sphere are a lot more interested in experimenting than corporate. Corporate is a lot more, no. This is working right now. Let's not change anything. And while the military or military-related contexts are much more aware of the adversary, and the adversary is not staying put. They're moving, but there's fog of war. You cannot see what they're doing. You don't know, right? So you need to. There is, a much bigger space for innovation, in proactive thinking and strategizing, right? Military is all about strategizing. So even though that's not my world, I kind of like parachuted in there, and I felt very much at home. I don't know. I guess. Playing a lot of military strategy games maybe helped. I don't know, but I really enjoyed that, and I enjoyed the process. And then I realized that my ideas that were crazy ideas of bringing technologies together, like blockchains and the most mature ideas on cybersecurity and the more post-quantum cryptography and the most mature ideas in AI, and bringing all these things together actually made a lot of sense for them. Putting that in in a structured way that actually has real world implications that solve real world problems from a strategic perspective, not just on the now, but looking into the future. So I got a lot of emotional backing, psychological backing from them, and that's what I was talking to you about before. Like, people think that people at these patent they are kind of like really tough and, go to the trenches and, whatever. They're actually extremely human, maybe because they know how fragile life is. And extremely approachable as well, and very open-minded, which I was very impressed. I didn't expect that. I actually thought that people they had like a structured mind, because the space where they are, right? But that's not the case. So that was really cool. I went into a call once that had a number of leaders of a number of countries, CIOs of countries and so on. And where somebody floated the idea, hey, why don't we use decentralization to actually, take away the risks that exist on all these systems that are central but are like interoperable across the countries. And for me that was beautiful because it was a moment of like convergent evolution, right, where an animal in a part of the world and another one in the other side of the world evolve into being turtles, but they don't know about each other, right? And I didn't tell them about my idea or what I was doing already for, I don't know, maybe a year at that point. It just made sense for them to go in that direction. And for me, that was like a huge tick box that led me to speak at the time with the former chief of the NATO's intelligence committee, Mr. Kjell Grønhagen, a Norwegian general, about this, and he thought it was a great idea that we should go and we should prove it. We should go to incubators, accelerators, and so on. But all these things came together at the time that we just had Stuxnet come out, right? The first cyber ammunition or cyber weapon, if you want to call it that, that ended up destroying the Natanz nuclear power plant and research plant in Iran without dropping a single bomb or something like that. And of course that escaped, and then it was improved by the Russians and so on and so on. It was a big, it's like it was like shooting yourself on the foot with a bazooka, actually, because the ones that produced it are the ones that are the most vulnerable to it. Anyways, it was a very exciting moment, and everybody was paying a lot of attention to cyber weapons. It's a real thing that has real world impact, can actually destroy real world things like pipelines or nuclear centrifuges or whatever. And if you can use it for that, then you can use it for A, B, C, D, right? So I was at that mindset. I was very excited and interested, me and myself and my group at the time, ethical hacking group, about reverse engineering malware and things like that. But there was the deep notion of the single point of failure, as in every device in the world, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's digital and it's connected to a network, it's a single point of failure to everything it is connected to, right? It could be applications, could be hardware. So that means that the more complex the world gets, the more IoT that is, Internet of Trouble as I call it, the harder it is to defend. You just have more entry points, and and that's not the direction we want to go. So for me, blockchain there was like super obvious. Like, we need to bring these things together. And I spoke, trust me, I flew a lot. I made like maybe 50 flights of like, hey guys, let's talk about this. And people weren't even understanding what I was saying. And I thought maybe I'm crazy. But where I found the kind of like that thought reflected back with, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And what if we do this with this, was in the military setting.
You said a lot of people didn't understand, right?
No. It was too early, I think.
Let's simplify things. You're the co-founder and CEO of Naoris Protocol. If your mom asked what Naoris Protocol is, what would you tell her? Simple, no jargon.
So Naoris Protocol is just a universal trust system, right? That allows for, let's say, if you have a village, right? Normally in a village, everybody knows in the village who the idiot is, and the village idiot. and
if you don't know who it is, you probably are the idiot.
That could be, exactly. Yeah. So maybe you're not part of the consensus, right? But there is a consensus over everybody. Who is good, who is bad, who is a person that you can rely on, so on and so forth, right? And that happens because they all trust each other, right? And because they all communicate. And that's what we're doing with machines, right? So we're using mathematical principles that are extremely resilient, like at post-quantum level, which are like, quantum fingerprints of things. And when we share them with all the other machines, they act like the people in the village. They can all validate and verify that this is the right person that does or doesn't do this, or that should be trusted or not, right? But we're doing that in a very binary setting. So we're decentralizing trust itself from an infrastructure perspective. So just like with the village, in order for you to have trust, you need to have the people first, right? But with organizations or governments or whatever, you already have the people. You already have the systems. They're already there. They're already decentralized. You're just using them wrong. So we're using what's there already to create a consensus driven by that existing decentralization, backed by that decentralization, with very strong mathematical principles that proves state. So it proves that this thing is in a good state for everything, right? And if you think about this is a really, really powerful principle, because for the first time, you can prove that, for example, as your bank is making a SWIFT transaction at that moment, that the process and the server that's doing that, for example, and the application that the user pushed the button to do it, right? If they are all in a trusted state, then you want that to happen. And right now, there is no way for you to prove that, or anything else. There's a lot of assumptions that you have that are legacy, where that just adds to the risk that exists. And what I found, and the people that we've worked found, is that the foundational problem is centralization. So the centralized principle leads us to have to trust something we cannot trust, right? That's it.
You claim Naoris is the first post-quantum blockchain in production.
Yeah.
Why does quantum resistance matter, and why now?
So we have worked with a number of super government organizations, but we have worked also with the IEEE Foundation in the creation of a white paper towards post-quantum in blockchains. We have a peer-reviewed paper with them that allowed us to, or we built on top of it, I would say, and continued to build to the point where we are now in production with that. So why is that important? There's many reasons why it's important. First of all, the current cryptography space in the world, it's what's called elliptic curve cryptography. So it's the cryptography that we've had forever, pretty much since the beginning of the internet, that initially was classified as ammunition, so it couldn't be exported. But now it's not. That's not the issue. And the issue is that while it is very strong and it works now because classical computers have a lot of difficulty deriving that kind of math. So it's, let's say, if you wanted to break a cryptographic key of, say, a private key on a blockchain, or something that's encrypted that's being sent over the internet, for example, just an encrypted message, you would probably need, I don't know, like all the computing power on Earth for like a billion years, right, together to do that. So it's not feasible, right, to do that. But with post-quantum cryptography, and post-quantum just means quantum safe, it's the same thing, you actually have another algorithm that has been proven to be resistant to mathematical threats, to quantum chips in an extrapolated way, so quantum level attacks and traditional attacks, that the quantum computers have a very hard time dealing with that math. So it's a different kind of math. So, as you know, current computers have, we are now at the kind of like the nanometer scale. So we have almost reached the atomic limit of production of transistors, which means that we've almost reached the limit of production of CPUs or GPUs from this technology perspective. And after that, what's there is the subatomic. And the subatomic is quantum computing. So quantum computing is the risk. Quantum resistance is the resistance to the risk. And this risk is definitely coming. I know a lot of specialists in the space believe it's going to be in the next 5 to 7 years. But every year it seems like it's 50% closer. Of course, we'll get to a point probably in the near future where this 50% doesn't become like smaller and smaller. That never happens, but it just happens. And it's not a theoretical thing, it's a real thing. There's quantum chips that work right now. And they're good at one thing. So you're not going to be running like Need for Speed or Outlook on a quantum computer anytime soon, but they are really, really good at doing maths. And unfortunately, all the world's cryptography is built on something that's vulnerable to them, right? So why is this important again? Because if you are not quantum resilient right now, your data can be harvested right now, stored by a country, an adversary, a hacker, whatever, in a hard drive that you don't control, and in 2, 3, 5 years, decrypted, and all the stuff that's under your key taken away. Could be information, could be nuclear codes, it could be your Bitcoin, it could be whatever, right? Because everything in the world that has value right now is protected by quantum vulnerable cryptography, right? And as soon as there is a quantum computer with enough computing power to break this memory space, it will be able to access all secrets in the world at the same time everywhere. And that is really scary. It would be the biggest geopolitical imbalance in our lifetimes, maybe ever, right? And that it's impossible to imagine what that will lead to. And blockchains have the same problem. They are not special from that perspective. It's so the impact of this is absolute. Like if you don't take those steps now, because your data is being captured now, your whatever you thought was a secret is no longer. Like your transactions, your keys, your whatever it is, right? Your encrypted data, right? That's why, if you look at countries' 2030, 2040 plans, they all have quantum quantum plans, decentralized AI plans, and other things like this, that are very much focused on mitigating the risk into the future. They're very aware of this. And even, for example, in the US, there is laws that came out that said that all entities that deal with the government, they need to be post-quantum before 2030. This is what they're saying publicly. Privately, it's probably earlier. But if you look at the expenditure in this realm also, like, for example, China has spent more in quantum technologies than in their nuclear arsenal, for example, in the last years. And that tells you how strategic it is for them, for example. It's the same, the expenditure is the same as in China for the European Union and the US together. So this is a foundational technology. What we have done is we have created a way to use these in blockchains. So that means that we can actually level up any existing, layer 1, layer 2. So we are a meta layer. We can apply to any kind of layer, to a post-quantum level from the infrastructure side, which we call sub-zero layer, all the way, because it's the only part that's not decentralized yet. It's the pure infrastructure. Because if you have let's say you have Ethereum or you have Bitcoin or whatever, you have a bunch of validators. But the chain is not, the chain is cryptography, right? But cryptography is really weak right now because of quantum computers. So you need to level it up. And the only thing that's keeping it what it is, and the consensus what it is, in a resilient way, is cryptography. But the cryptography is the backbone of it, and it's no longer safe. So all of that infrastructure is actually operating from central points of failure. So if you look, for example, at how, exchange A, B, or C was hacked, or it's very rarely that they broke the blockchain. They didn't. Somebody, hacked the computer, they stole some keys, and then they, raised their privileges, and they took control over some critical processes there, and they stole $1 billion, right? And countries are doing that. North Korea is doing that. It's the main financial source right now, by far. And anyways, that area, so blockchains, people think that they're actually operating like in a cloud, like, in the atmosphere, like transactions moving and all. Actually, they're served by all these validators that are central points of failure, that are centralized, that are on the cloud or people's houses or whatever. And so that's our first objective that we had from kind of like former NATO leader mandates, was to decentralize the infrastructure, making sure that all of it, so all the validators, for example, could actually prove to each other that they were good, that they were trusted. Therefore, they're not hacked, so on. If they are, you don't want them to participate. But that's not the case right now, right? So for this to be more mature, there's two areas that need to, for this to be more mature from a blockchain perspective and for blockchains to be used in the real world, there's two areas that need to be leveled up. One is the infrastructure itself. It needs to be decentralized. Currently, it's centralized. The trust over that infrastructure is also non-existent. It needs to exist. So that's our sub-zero layer. And the transactions themselves need to be post-quantum too. Because a quantum computer could, for example, grab your transaction, which is a hash. It's public, right? Your private key is private, so it's harder. But the hash is public, and there can be attacks against hashes with quantum computers. That would be orders and orders and orders of magnitude more efficient than current ones. But because you already signed that transaction as a Bitcoin holder, for example, or a crypto holder, it's already broadcasted. So the consensus is going to grab it and it's going to execute it. But me as an adversary, I could grab that transaction and maybe do double spend or change the destination or change the amount or whatever. But because it has already been approved by you, it will be executed. And this is really risky. I would say this is probably the weakest part of blockchains right now. And that's an area where we apply as well.
You guys raised $36 million and brought in names like Tim Draper, who's a big Bitcoin OG.
Yes.
Big Bitcoin bull since a long time.
Yeah.
What are you guys doing with all this money?
Well, a lot of that is pushed into research and development. Obviously, we have to create technologies. We have created a number of technologies that solve these fundamental problems that I was telling you about. A lot of that is also focused on the critical area of things because most of the use cases, besides the Web3 use case, so you have the Web3 bubble, which is a $3 trillion space, more or less. And then you have the rest of the world, which is like 170 trillion plus, I don't know, 60 trillion of intangible assets, right? It's a huge area, right? And then if you add, like, for example, bonds and debt, it's 700 trillion, right? So it's a bigger, all of these needs, a different level of security than what exists, right? All of this is running on assumptions, right? I assume, because there's no better option, that this system that holds this, SWIFT system or these bonds or whatever, or that's encrypting this is good. How do I know? There is no way for me to know. Like, there's no way for me to prove that mathematically in a highly resilient environment. So that's why it's so important. It also spoke to other spaces, including enterprise, like telecommunications, software development, robotics, car manufacturing industry, and others that we have as investors, and even family offices and other groups that strategically put money into things that are going to be big in the future. It's obvious that the future is quantum. Like, if you look at what IBM is saying, what Microsoft is saying, what Google is saying, when they talk about, for example, Web 4, it's going to be a quantum-driven internet that is with trust by design and AI by design, right? You cannot have that right now in the current paradigm. You need to change the fundamentals, and that's really what we're doing. And it has a transversal impact across industries. If you have an industry, it doesn't matter if it's pharmaceutical or a car that you want your smart cars, for example. Cars now are servers on wheels. If you want to make sure that you don't get some malware there that in a computer it's it stops you from writing your Word file or something. Like, worst case scenario steals maybe your credentials for your bank, right? Which is bad, but it's much worse if your car drives you off the road, and down the bridge. And that's game over for you. You can't reset yourself, right? So if you want to create a highly resilient environment for whatever, business you're on, you need to think about two things. You need to think about decentralizing the trust part of the business, because right now it doesn't exist. Right now, the only thing that exists is security. And I want to be a bit philosophical here. Security is very different than trust. Let's say we're here. There's a guard by the door with a gun. He's protecting us. He's our security. The question is, how do you know you can trust him? How do you know he's not going to turn around and shoot you with that gun, Maybe you did some, I don't know, checks on him. Maybe you would like to know like the integrity of his brain. In a digital system, you can actually know the integrity of their brain, right? With a signature, maybe a post-quantum signature, right? So that it is very resilient. What you want to have is trust about the truth you're seeing. So what you're seeing on screens about anything, you have no proof that what you're seeing is real. You have no proof that that data has been changed until it got there, or that it was changed, in location because somebody tampered with the process that sent the data, right? And if you think, for example, about AIs right now, it's the exact same situation. Like if you send a message to ChatGPT, how do you know that the model is actually ingesting data that's from a good source? Like you don't have any idea about the source. You don't know if it's been hacked or it's been colluding with the Chinese government or whatever. You don't know, and changing your opinion for the answer. You don't know if the question you're sending is the same question that the server received, or if it was changed in movement. You don't know if the answer is the same answer that the server sent you, or if it just changed in movement. You don't know anything. You don't know if the model has been tampered with, right? So there can't be in this model any assurance about anything. But everything starts from assurance and from trust. And then you can have resilience, and then you can have security. So really what we're creating, or what we have created, is a new paradigm of trust that is transversal to any digital system or operation. That's kind of like fundamental technology, like like a Wi-Fi antenna or a processor. Like you can adapt this to anything. I think that's why we got invested.
What's the one thing I should remember today and bring to the family dinner table on Sunday evening?
Oh, it's very simple. In Sunday evening, okay, our public sale is 2 days later. That's what you should say.
Beautiful. Amazing. Thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure.
That was a great conversation.
Thank you so much for this human contact and the way you conducted this. Really appreciate that. It's a unique interview for me. Cheers.
Amazing. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I had a lot of fun doing that.
Same here.
Cool.